Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Wolf Den. This is the Howling Gamers podcast, where we talk about video games, movies, anime, and anything else that piques our interest. I am CyberWolfJimmy. You wish you were a Cyberwolf. Sure is. Yeah, there is. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's worth talking about is there are people I know who don't actually know what Power Rangers is. And, that shocks me. So I thought we'd just start with for anyone who doesn't know what Power Rangers is, it's an Americanized version of a Japanese TV series that has been running even longer than Power Rangers has, and I think they're entering in their 30th season at this point, so it's been running a long time. Yes. Or you don't. Oh, the toys are fantastic. Yeah, I mean, coming back to what it is, it's, the teenagers mostly who get superhuman powers to transform into spandex tight superheroes who will then jump into giant robots that act like transformers to form a mega robot to fight giant aliens. I mean, what's not to be intrigued by that concept? Oh yeah. And I'll say I think that's why I enjoyed it as much as, it was formulaic, and I um legitimately have a copy of every single episode. That it's one of those things where it's very formulaic. You know what's coming, but I think at this point it's one of those things where it's something you watch as a guilty pleasure when, you just don't want to think about something. You know what's going to happen, so it's not something you have to watch carefully or think about. It can be something that's just enjoyable, and I think that's why I have continued to enjoy it. I've got a 6-year-old who's starting to enjoy it as well, so it's now cross generational at that point. So yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, from what I've seen, there are two types that seem to get in there. There are those that get in there because they're looking for somewhere to start, and there are those who that's what they initially planned, and then they just end up staying within the fandom, and they hit every con, they get pulled into every sort of nostalgic crossover episode, and they never really leave Power Rangers because people love them for it. So, and I think, hitting on that same note, there was a Netflix original that came out not too long ago. Once and Always. And by not that long ago, I mean it was long ago enough. It came out April-ish, end of April. But it was one of those things where it was neat to see that they took the original cast from going on 30 some odd years ago, brought back as many of them as possible, and made a brand new narrative. I know when Netflix announced that they were going to be doing it as an original, I cringed a little bit because I
Yeah.
wasn't sure what they were going to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I give them the win on that one. I think they did a fantastic job.
I think it turned out quite well given what we were expecting to come out of it, but also just what they could have done with it, right? It could have been very base and very uh there's crass terms that I could use for it, but just,
Sure.
it could be very fan servicey but without any reason behind it, right? Like just hey, let's put these actors together, or hey, let's put, without any real reason for it, right? Like they didn't even try, they just wanted people to buy it or to watch it, right? And I don't think they went down that route. I think they did give us enough of that where it's like, oh yeah, this is, a reunion, a fun thing, all that sort of stuff. But they gave us an actual reason why this is happening, and like it is a thing in and of itself. So you could take out the past elements and still make some interesting content here, right? It didn't rely that was the only thing that made it happen, right? It was tied into that, and that made it fun, and that made it so that we wanted to watch it, but it wasn't too much about that. It was its own thing, and that allowed us to kind of actually enjoy this.
I also think they did a good job of providing more depth of the existing characters.
Yep.
There were certain choices that they could have made as far as just, not giving us any insight into what's happened to those people over the last, you know, where I think we're seeing them in their 40s ish. So,
Yep.
from teenager to 40s, they could have just sort of dropped them in and, said, here's our episode. But you got a bit of the backstory to see that, they had moved on to other things, they had done other things. Certain ones were, I think, on a space station of some sort. So, it was one of those things where they they showed that they had, Power Rangers was not the only thing that they clearly did within their lives, and they did more things, but because they were Power Rangers, they're always apt to be pulled back into that universe because once a Ranger, always a Ranger, right?
Yep. That is very true. And they tied the characters together well. I think they were respectful to some of the things that had gone on and some of the problems that
Yes.
have come out of some of the original things. I think they kind of showcased a little bit of the of they didn't point a finger at any of it necessarily, but like, making Billy be a prominent role and be, kind of a role model in his own right of this episode is kind of uh, an apology to him for some of the things
Yep.
that went on in the early stages. We didn't focus on some Red Ranger, some person that everybody knows. We focused on this person who put a lot of time and energy into this and did a lot of time in this, but also wasn't treated the best, and we gave him a chance to shine his own way, right?
And if you do remember, his send off was also, I'm going to call it out. It was insulting. They didn't actually give the actual actor
Yep.
any screen time in the goodbye. It was a
Yep.
older version of himself that did a video call from uh, um, I'm drawing a blank now, where the Aquitians
Yeah.
home planet.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah. He wasn't handled particularly well, and there was a lot of reasons for that back in the day. And I'm happy to see that they maybe were able to give him a little bit of something in this space, right? Of actually giving him a chance to be there, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
And then,
I
go
think we're
ahead.
both on the same lines of, and then the other part of that is there's also someone who went through a very rough time not too long ago, who, there was some problems involved in their mental health was an issue, and they didn't necessarily call that out, which they could have potentially used that as a platform, but they also they didn't do any pandering on that side of it. They didn't focus on this. They didn't try to overhype, this thing. They didn't try to focus on it. They pointed out that it was there and that there was this thing, but they also just kind of left it there. They didn't give it too much of a thing. And I feel like they handled that as tactfully as they could have, right?
I also appreciate that they didn't just sort of retcon them out of it because they couldn't represent them. They found a comfortable middle ground of everyone knows, so
Yeah.
we're just going to accept what you've done. And I think they did it with what they had to work with. I think they did the best they did.
And that's what I mean. I think they handled it rather tactfully in that sense of like they give it a moment, they give it a chance to be there, but they also don't spend a very long time focusing on this thing. They just give it its space and then they continue with the story they're telling, right? So,
But then also, the Toy Trang, the actor who played the original Yellow Ranger, I don't think got as much publicity about having passed away in a car crash way, way back when. And I think they did a good job of using that as a narrative with her actual daughter coming in to surface in and taking, what was a tragic, unfortunate accident and turning it into, a part of the growing narrative that, showed her progression of getting past that and, moving on with things and,
yeah.
getting the proper mentoring and things. So yeah.
I agree, and they did give her a chance to actually shine and to give her the chance to actually be present, because yeah, I agree that was not an event that was really heavily covered, because maybe the timing and all those sorts of things, but also all sorts of different social issues involved in that, and so they're basically saying like, no, we're going to give this a chance to actually be processed and be brought up, and then yeah, we're gonna explore it as an ongoing thing, right? What's the next generation and how does it impact them, right?
Yeah.
And I love that. So I really enjoyed the episode. I think it was fun, it was engaging. I wish that there was more to it. Like, in all honesty, I could do with more of that, so I kind of enjoyed that, and I was happy to see what they were putting out.
So it's funny that you mentioned that because I read an article not too long ago that because of how well that was received, um, Netflix is in talks with Hasbro and Saban about doing another one in the future. I don't know exactly what they're going to do, but there's been talks of, hey, this was really well received, so let's make more money. And, I mean, who's going to say no to trying to make more money? So
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, if they're gonna do that and they're gonna output that kind of quality, I'm down for it, right?
I
Like,
think that's what it has to be. Is if they're going to continue that level of quality, I am 100% on board. If it's how can we, quickly make a quick buck, I think you're going to rapidly lose people, and that uh, probably would not be in your best interest.
yeah, because I mean, so there's two sides to this when it comes to Power Rangers, right? When you think of the show in and of itself, which is a rehash or a found footage version of this Japanese show, right? There is a certain amount of cheese. There's a certain amount of nonsense, and all of that sort of stuff that comes along with that you just accept. Right? It's part of what you engage with if you're watching this show, right? The villains are going to be cheesy. They're going to be over the top. The conversations are sometimes nonsensical. The acting is not always going to be great, you know, but this is what you're accepting to watch this thing that you're engaging in. But what the Netflix original kind of was they took a few of those elements out. The cheese was rounded off and a little bit uh, more put into places that made more sense. The acting and the writing was a little bit better. Like, I'm not gonna say this is Oscar worthy kind of content, but like, it wasn't as cheese just kind of thrown together by a bunch of people who needed to make this week's episode together, right? Like, it was actually thought out, and that's where they could play with some of these themes and concepts that were a little bit deeper because they could actually spend some time on that writing. And if that's what they're going to do with this, I'm down for it, because it's a little bit of a step up in terms of quality and refinement of some of that stuff, and I'm okay watching that. I'm still okay watching the cheese version of the show, but if you're doing that show, you're not delving into some of those more complex themes, right? You're dealing with teenagers going to school and fighting cheese monsters. Cool. I'm down for that. Like, no issues. But stay in your lanes, right? Know your focus, know your audience, but also know what you can accomplish reasonably.
And just to go back and clarify for some people who may not be aware of what we're talking about. So when Power Rangers was first created, we said it was based on a Japanese series. They actually took the fight footage of the Rangers fighting the monsters, and that's what the company that first came up with the concept of Power Rangers, Saban, they took that. That's what they purchased, and then they went to some writers and said, "Here's the fight footage. We want you to build a story and a narrative around these fight clips." That involved these teenagers at a high school. So if you went and watched some of the original episodes now, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Nope.
It's very convoluted. It's cut up. The storyline's really weird.
Oh, it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense.
But at the same time, knowing that information, you have a bit of an appreciation for the quality of writers they had to say, okay, we can see what they're fighting. Sure, we're going to have this as our storyline for the Americanized footage that we're going to show. Now, obviously, throughout the years, they have done a better job of aligning the Sentai to the Americanized form of things. But, that's where it started. And, just to clarify for anyone who wasn't familiar with that's how it was done. That's why we talk about the cheese, is that, they took fight footage and then built a storyline around already, post-production clips.
And I mean, when you're on a short deadline and your monster has, one big eye in the center, you're like, well, we're just going to call him Igor and we're just going to make his whole thing about blinding people. Done. We're done. Like, not even going to think about it anymore. And it's like, yeah, that's fair. When you're on a tight deadline and that's what you have to work with, you make it work. They're not going to go much deeper than that.
Yeah. All right, I think it's time we should talk about, the latest news that's come out.
All right. All right.
And that is the next series, or I should say the next season.
Yeah.
Cosmic Fury has been announced. It will be on Netflix this Friday. And as I found out, it is actually a Netflix exclusive that Hasbro and Saban have entered into an exclusivity contract with Netflix, which is why once and always the one-time original that we were talking about was launched on Netflix, and why they're in talks of doing some other things, because they currently have an exclusivity contract with Netflix. So if you're interested in checking out something ridiculous, I will say you don't need to watch all of the previous seasons. You can dive in at any point and be just as confused as we will be starting to watch it, even with the knowledge we have.
Like, let's be honest, the seasons have started to kind of connect in some ways, but there's no real start point for Power Rangers at this point. Like, There's so much going on in it. Like, you could start at the beginning and be just as confused once you get to the middle, because there's a lot of stuff in there. So, if you want to watch it, just jump right in. And if you enjoy it, there's a whole backlog of stuff you can go watch later, and maybe it'll give you some context for something or that sort of thing. But
because for the first 5 or 6 seasons, they used either a static cast or they canonically introduced and said farewell to cast members, so that there was an in-story reason for them coming in and out. And then I think about the 7th or 8th season, they just, wholesale cut the cast. And then for, I think, everything up until Samurai at that point, every season was a brand new story and a brand new cast, just like every Final Fantasy game is. I'm going to get Final Fantasy in here, whether you want it or not.
Never. It should never be in an episode about Power Rangers.
So,
it was
a 50-second trailer. You watched it. I've watched it.
I did. It happened. I mean, I'll say a few things about this. One,
go for it.
No idea why the current Rangers are suddenly now different, even though they look the same with different weapons, that they're now different range. Like, sure, back in my day, you got a whole costume change when you changed Power Rangers, not just we call ourselves something different now. Whatever. Don't care. No idea why that's happening. But if you take all of that out of the equation, that trailer looked freaking epic. Like, they had some big citywide battles going on, the music in the background. They got whole big choreographed fight scenes. Like, this is stuff we only saw in the movie version of Power Rangers, and they're pulling it into the season. Like, I mean, hey, if that's where they want to go with this, I'm okay with that. I'm down for this.
So I've done a little bit more research on this because I've been following this for the past year or so, ever since Dino Fury finished, which was the season ahead of this. So the first thing I'm going to touch on is, they're using the same cast as they did for the past 2 seasons of Dino Fury. And for anyone who isn't familiar with it, as of what we call the Neo Saban era, which is where Saban owned it, they sold it to Disney, then they bought it back from Disney when they realized that it was still making money. And the Neo Saban era is when it may have shifted a bunch of other places as well. But
no, it was kind of the other way around. Disney bought it, and then Disney kind of messed it up, and people stopped caring about it. So Saban bought it back to try to make it good again.
Fair enough. So as of Samurai, they started a new trend where they kept the same cast around for 2 seasons.
Yes.
So everything beyond that, there's always going to be a season, such as Samurai, and then a Super Samurai or Super whatever it happens to be.
Which is interesting because
keeps the same cast.
They didn't do that with Beast Morphers or Dino Fury. They didn't add Super to it. They just had a second season with the same name.
Yeah, I think they realized that they couldn't really do a Super Beast Morphers and Super Dino Fury because they didn't have that super upgrade mode that they did in some of those other ones.
Or they realized that just putting Super in front of your name is kind of a stupid reason to have a whole new season.
That's fair enough.
Just have a second season.
Anyway.
I don't. Anyways, yeah.
So Cosmic Fury is breaking that mold a little bit by continuing to use the same cast as what was in Dino Fury.
Yeah.
Now, everything that I have read, which would fall in line with the fact that you said it was epic, is that this is going to be the official last season of Power Rangers that Hasbro is going to be producing.
Oh.
And anything else that comes out now is going to be 100% Netflix.
Interesting.
They have not given much detail on what they're going to do, but this is the quote-unquote last season. And I know we have seen that within Space, and we've seen it with RPM. So it's one of those things where, is this going to be the last season? Maybe, maybe not.
But if Netflix is taking the reins, I could see that being almost less of a story-based decision and more of a contract-based decision. Because I wonder if some of these people had contracts for certain things. Like they had to sign over the contract when Netflix took them over, so they had to do another season with them. They're like, I don't know what to. They're like, you know what? Let's just make one season and just like turn it into something else, and then we can start with what we want. Once
that's possible.
Now we've now taken Hasbro out of the loop, we can now choose what to do with it. So I don't know, but that's interesting though. That's interesting information, and it's like, what is Netflix going to do with it in that sense?
Not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if what they've done with the original and what we're seeing as a teaser in this is any indication of what they want to do with Power Rangers, I'm willing to give them creative control and just sort of say, show me what you can do. And, if they're going to turn it into something that's awesome as a Netflix original, maybe I'm going to resubscribe for longer than, just watching this season. So,
yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Now the question is Saban going to still be involved, or is it just Hasbro that's out?
Good question. I don't know that. Haven't read enough to be able to comment on that.
Because I don't know if Saban has been too involved in a while, but
yeah. Now, the one thing that's worth noting on their costumes, they have changed slightly. So if you know anything about the Dino Fury costumes, they had the jumpsuit with a pattern down the middle, which has now been replaced with I'm just going to call it the Dragon Shield, because that's my best way of describing the triangular shoulder armor that they have. And what I find interesting, and yes, I'm going there again, you and I both did the Final Fantasy XIV summer event where they had a whole Power Ranger theme thing there. And I noticed a lot of similarities between the outfit we saw for the Cosmic Fury Ranger and the outfit that you got in that event. There were obviously some creative flair done to it, but I almost wonder if this was designed as a plug for the fact that Cosmic Fury is coming out and now you have your Cosmic Fury costume.
Maybe there's some possibility there. I mean, who knows? I'd be interested to see if that was the intent behind it, but I mean, I doubt.
So I've been tracking our time, and I think we're getting to the point where we should probably have a final question. What do you think?
We probably should. I just want to go to one thing. I did.
Oh, absolutely, go for it.
I did look it up, or at least just briefly the information from Wikipedia. So Toei actually owns the footage and the costumes of the Japanese show, and Saban actually sold the rights again in 2018 to Hasbro. So Hasbro has been producing it since 2018 all by itself. So that would be basically from Super Ninja Steel on. So Beast Morphers and Dino Fury is fully Hasbro. So if Netflix is buying it from Hasbro, that means Saban as a company technically has no ownership in it.
That's reasonable. Interesting. Okay.
So, that's just the quick version there. Yes. Yeah. So final question. I want to ask you this one first. I want to get your thoughts first. Our final question. So which season has your favorite Ranger team?
So I came up with this question, and then it took me quite some time to think about it, because I realized that I'm going to throw a nod to the original team and just say nothing else would have happened without them.
Yep.
But at the same time, is it my favorite Ranger team? No. I would give that to probably Time Force. And my reason for that is just there was more character growth in. I enjoyed the overall team. There are definitely, and I'm going to say it's more the newer teams, where there's at least one Ranger who just gets on my nerves. And, as a result, I don't like that whole team. But Time Force was one where I appreciated the whole team. And I appreciated that we actually saw some character growth. We also had properly defined characters where just because of one given episode, we're not trying to change who a ranger is just to match the narrative of the story. They kept true to who their characters were the entire way through, and they melded the episodes into who their characters were. So I'm going to give it the Time Force.
Interesting, interesting. That's I wouldn't have expected that pick from you. Yeah, having like 7 Red Rangers in one season, I wouldn't have expected you to have chosen that one. But interesting, interesting.
Now, so I'm going to ask you, what one is yours? And then I want to know what you thought I was going to pick.
I have had significantly less time to think about this.
That's true.
So I'm going to give myself the chance to add more than one.
Yes, please.
Because I have 3, but all for very different reasons right now.
Go for it.
So I'm going to go with the first one that came up because I kind of have to. Mystic Force. So as a season, I love some of the concepts that they pulled out in there. The whole idea of them using magic as well as being power. Like, I just loved that idea. I felt like they had some really cool characters in some of the aspects, and there were some other fun elements, and they wore capes. I mean, it was just all around cool in my opinion. So it's one of my favorite seasons overall, not because it's the best, but because I just like it. But if I had to pick like a favorite team outside of that, that's like the one that sticks in my mind the most. And yes, I'm taking out the original team because the nostalgia factor of the original is kind of a bit hard to break out of, right? Like they're quintessential. Yeah. So it's I'm kind of removing that because it's hard to get past that. But if I had to have another team that kind of stuck in my head, it would be the Jungle Fury team. I really enjoyed.
Okay, I can see that. Yes,
I really enjoyed the dynamic that they had. I really enjoyed the powers that they had in that show, and how it kind of played itself out over the course of the season, and that sort of stuff. So I really enjoyed that show overall, and yeah, that definitely, as a team, would definitely be one of my.
Yeah, Jungle Fury was definitely one of those that I had in the top that I was weighing on. So yes, I agree with you there.
Yeah, so those would be the 2 that I'd have to say because I had less time to think about this. So
that's fair.
And if I had to give a nod, I'll give the tip of the hat to the Dino Thunder team because they got to play around with Tommy, coming back from being invisible and making cracks about having to buy a new wardrobe because he became a new color and stuff. Like it had a different feel to it in a lot of ways, but there were some things they did in that show as a team and as other elements that just really was a lot of fun, and I think they had some fun with it.
Now, you and I have talked about it previously. The problem with me for Dino, if we talked about the original 3, I would have absolutely said that's my team. The problem is
that they had
the White Ranger. It's one of those things where I think they wanted to try and re-emulate what they had with the evil Green Ranger.
Yeah, and
I felt like it felt flat. I just didn't like him.
Well, his performance was bad too. Like, and I don't know if it was him as an actor or if it was the direction or the writing or all of them. It felt so bad. And not bad in the way that the originals felt bad. Because the originals felt bad, but you knew. This one felt like he was really trying. They were really trying for this, and it just wasn't working. I agree with you there. I block that portion of the show out of my memory so that I can enjoy the other sections.
Yes. See, if I had to guess, I would have thought you would have gone with Dino Thunder.
Yeah.
That's just... Yep.
Yeah, I definitely it holds a special place for me in a lot of different ways. Yeah. But yeah, the wisecracking elements of it is just the fun part, but it's not my favorite team when you break it down to the full team.
Yeah.
So
then curiosity, did you think I was going to pick?
Oh, I would have assumed you picked Turbo. Like that was absolutely your favorite. I know it. You never stop
Oh
talking
man.
about it.
You know what? We don't have the time for me to go into every reason why I hate Turbo.
I
And I
mean,
will say it's not the worst
it
team.
was either that or RPM. It was one of the two. So
You know what? RPM I enjoyed. It's Operation
sorry,
Overdrive
Operation
that
Overdrive.
I could go on a rant about how much I hate all of those people. That none of them were likable. But we don't have the time for that. I think it's time that we wrap things up for this week. So thank you everyone who has joined in. I hope you found this entertaining. If you have any suggestions of what you'd like to see, please leave them in the comments. Please mention us at Howling Gamers. You can find us on Twitter, X, whatever they call it these days. We're happy to appease the audience and talk about a topic that you'd like us to cover. Outside of this, you can find either myself or both of us on Twitch at CyberWolfJimmy, where I am doing charity streaming on a regular basis, and sometimes I get company there. Right now, we're finalizing the last week of Crate for Sick Kids Crate 100K. I'm 81% of the way through my goal for that. I will be back on Friday playing more amazingly mediocre Final Fantasy 16. So if you're interested in watching me terribly run through that and lose to Titan more times than I'd like to admit on Sunday, be sure to check that out. I will also be there Saturday morning building some Lego with my son because he wants to help out sick kids too.
Nice. That's awesome. We love that. And we love that you support all those wonderful causes, streams, all the different aspects. And we hope that everyone can come check us out whenever we're available. We will be back here hopefully next week with a whole nother topic and a side helping of Final Fantasy or a whole helping of Final Fantasy and nothing else, because that's all Jimmy thinks about. Until then, we'll see you next time.
Have a great night, everyone.